Hello, folks. Good evening. You're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. My name is Habib Enyola. Yes, I haven't introduced myself in quite a bit because I always put my name on the screen, but today I just felt like doing that. Well, interesting times we've been living in. COVID-19 has done quite a lot of damage everywhere. So many countries are on lockdown, especially in Europe. Still, record deaths being recorded in the United States. And a couple of African countries too have been looking inward and trying to figure out how to deal with this pandemic. It's really terrible. It's hurting a lot of people, it's hurting a lot of businesses. But the one thing that hasn't changed is food. People are still eating. In fact, the purchase of food has grown, exponentially simply because a lot of people are more or less at home now. And of course, when they're idle, in most cases, it's quite a bit more. But then for some people, it's a case of when they have disposable funds to buy the food. Now, in countries in Western Europe and maybe in the United States, they get a stipend from the government to support them to be able to buy one or two things, to keep going and try to stay healthy, eat something, stay healthy, take a walk, stuff like that. They give you, guidelines on how to live and all that, but it's not enough. It's a lot of depression. A lot of people are losing their minds, being locked up at home because it just feels like being in prison. Like, what do they call that thing again? I think it's called when you're locked at home. I can't remember what it is, but basically that's just what it really is. So tough times. Well, as tough as it is, quite a few people are making things happen when it comes to this pandemic, when it comes to the economic meltdown. A lot of technology is being adapted, some being developed afresh, especially when it comes to agriculture. We've seen quite a lot of tech innovation when it comes to agriculture in Africa. In 2020, we've seen smart automation, soil DNA testing, precision agriculture, smart sensors, a lot of stuff, being introduced. One of the things that has started getting a lot of traction is vertical farming. What's vertical farming? Where people farm more or less from containers or in the same space, but instead of going into the ground, they farm above the ground, layers and stuff like that. So quite a lot is happening. And then when you now look at the people who are the entrepreneurs in that space, what are they doing? How are they getting it done? A lot of people have wondered. Last week, we did a show, and that show was the first part of this this two-part series on the agricultural supply chain in Africa. What are the potentials? How can you tap in? Some got a little, info on what the agri value chain was in the last show. So it was pretty interesting. If you haven't watched it, please go to the YouTube channel. It's there, it's waiting for you. You can always watch it. You can always put your comments there, like, share. And if you haven't followed us yet, please make sure you subscribe and tick that little bell beside so you can get notifications when we come up with some of these rather interesting shows. So tonight, we're going to be talking to another person in the agri-supply chain sector, somebody who's been doing quite a few things. He's been there for quite a few years, well, 10 years thereabouts, when he founded the AIP BOS, and he became the managing director. His name is Michael Kadiri. Michael's talking to us all the way from London, and I'll be bringing Michael into the studio shortly after this quick commercial break. Hello, once again. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. Tonight, we're going to be talking about agri-products supply chain in Africa. This is the second part. Last week, we did the show on it, which was the first part, and was rather interesting. Now, tonight, we're going to be talking to another expert in that field, another serious entrepreneur who has been in the game, seen that, done that, and has been making leaps and bounds. His name is Michael Kadiri. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening. Nice to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to join us. We know you're a very busy man, and a lot of things are happening right now because there's a lot of demand for food. People are at home, they're eating and eating and eating and eating, So that means there's a lot of demand for agri-products. But also, the COVID-19 has thrown quite a few spanners in the works because a lot of disruption when it comes to the supply chain. When it comes to shipping, we've seen a lot of time being eroded. Lead time is off. So before you order something from the likes of Amazon, and it's supposed to take maybe 2-3 days, but now you're going to spend 2 months, 3 months, depending on what part of the world you're in, before you actually get your product. So we do know that it's been quite challenging. But how have you been surviving so far with all these challenges?
So thank you for the question. Our primary business actually is to originate, aggregate, process, and export commodities to the global food chain. So, that market, that business has been very badly affected because obviously logistic chains have been terribly affected by COVID. However, to answer your question when it comes to getting food from the farm gate to the table in Nigeria, we are sort of a little lucky because our economy is not very sophisticated. And so the impact of COVID on our local supply chain was that we faced food inflation rather than disruption to the logistic assets. Food inflation was the major problem because, of course, a number of state governments instituted various different lockdowns, and the impact was that food producers and food suppliers raised their prices. I would say that that was the major problem.
Okay, so we were under the impression that you did quite a bit of exporting as well, reading your company profile and all that. Yeah, of course. It was founded 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we know that you've had quite a bit of experience working abroad. You have quite extensive connections, so to speak, when it comes to the sector in which you are in right now. Now, that means you suffered a double blow, Brexit and COVID-19 at the same time. That's massive. Really massive. What you're speaking about now is just the Nigerian end of things. For a business that does business, business on a global scale, it's really challenging. But at the same time, they say there are benefits. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is how do you pivot, survive, manage, and thrive in such dire, circumstances?
Okay, I think that the impact of COVID-19 and Brexit, as we spoke about, has not yet completely played out. I think it will play out over the next coming years, actually. When it comes to COVID, my sentiments are that what this health pandemic has caused is it has accelerated the demise of certain types of businesses. I think that certain businesses were facing difficulties before COVID. So, for example, if you're in the retail space, we all know that the demand for retail products was moving online. And so brick and mortar businesses were going to suffer. When it comes to my sector, of course, like I said earlier on, our major business is exporting commodities from Nigeria into the global food chain. And that was affected because, logistic assets were grounded everywhere. And it meant that it was difficult to meet our supplies. Most of our customers are, in more developed, more sophisticated economies where they rely on just-in-time supplies. And so if you can't deliver at a certain date and a certain time even, then you've missed the supply. And so because we couldn't do that, because of the effects that COVID has had on logistic assets, then it meant that our business suffered very badly.
I can't imagine what you probably would have gone through. But at the same time, like we stated earlier on, a lot of companies who are in the food business now are actually like smiling to the bank. Now, when we look at a country like Nigeria, you spoke of food inflation. We realize that quite a lot of farmers are not educated on the basics in itself, especially when it comes to the supply chain. Yes, we can argue that there are too many challenges. So some people would say you have the economy, you have security, you have infrastructure, you have the farming infrastructure as well and all that. But at the same time, if people were educated to a certain extent, about the basics in their sector, my opinion that is maybe they will be able to stop things like the food inflation and all that, especially when you do things like just in time, like you mentioned. I'm not sure if most people understand what just in time is, but if the farmers were able to practice such strong, business processes and all that, they should be able to meet up. And then you'll be able to control or strike a balance when you have such challenges like this logistics being grounded and all of that. What type of education do you give to, say, your suppliers, for instance, when it comes to their business processes?
Okay.
In order to know business at the very least.
Yeah, so, the phenomenon that you describe, which is the fact that sadly in Africa, the farmers are the least paid. They're the group in the whole chain that continue to be on the borderline of poverty, even though they grow and harvest the food. And I'm reminded by a documentary I saw a number of years ago when they were talking to a cocoa farmer in Ghana who'd never seen a bar of chocolate. And this is the phenomenon. And I've personally been to at least 8 African countries on a regular basis in pursuit of my business interests. And the phenomenon, I don't know if it's an issue of, in my opinion is that I don't know if it's what you would mean by educating the farmers. I think the challenge I see for them is that there's a terrible lack of funding to farming in Africa, and there is a terrible lack of physical infrastructure to get their goods from farm to either a trading depot or to a wholesale market. Those are the 2 big issues. On our part, in order to advance our own interests, okay, we would give the farmers things like seedlings, and we would help them with various inputs to make sure that they get to harvest. Because if they get to harvest, we benefit.
Okay, so now when I asked that question earlier on, there was a scheme or a program that was done some time ago in Kwara State. I can't remember if it was 2007, 2008, thereabouts, or earlier. Now, the former then governor of Kwara State, Bukola Saraki, decided that the displaced Zimbabwean farmers, he was going to strike a deal with them, bring them over to Nigeria, give them land, give them funding, and they will teach the local farmers how to improve on their production and their harvests. And they did quite a great job of it. How did they do a great job of it? The farmers were given hands-on training by much more experienced farmers, much more sophisticated farmers, and they were able to increase their yields. He did put a couple of infrastructure in place in order to be able to make that scheme a success, at least as far as I know, as of that time. There was a cargo wing of an airport that was built, and then the roads from that particular village or town, because it became a town anyways, the town was called Shonga. It was actually developed to ease transportation, haulage from that farm into the city, and then of course for products that were going to be exported, they were taken to the airport and then they were flown out. We know that they export a lot of milk from that farm. Now, we do know for a fact that it is actually because of the trainings that we're giving to those farmers. The trickle-down effects were actually very huge. If private businesses like yours looked at small training programs for these farmers, do you think it will make any long-term impact? Because if people have knowledge, they are better able to handle the situation that arises when they're in business.
I agree. But you see, I've been to Kwara quite a few times, actually. Okay. And I've been to that part of the world where then Governor Bukola Saraki attempted this project. I'll tell you now that those guys are no longer there.
Oh, wow.
So something went wrong. And the dry port that you talk about is no longer functioning. So something went wrong. And I make this point because there is an ecosystem that needs to operate efficiently for these things to sustain. So you may try to look after some of the supply side, but if the demand side it does not operate efficiently, if the markets are not efficient, these things will not sustain. So if you look at a business like ours, you know, we try to stay in our own lane simply because our size doesn't allow us to make too much of a meaningful impact. So our major export, for example, is sesame seeds. And then what we do is we make sure that the farmers have the right seedlings. We make sure that they can clear their land when it's time to plant. We try to follow up with good systems. We've even brought into Nigeria expatriate trainers to train the farmers who are going to supply us individually, our individual company. But you see, I think that doing that on our own won't have the impact on the economy that we all desire. The thing needs to be efficient from the supply and the demand side. And I think that's why the gallant effort that was made by Dr. Saraki at the time is not there today.
Wow, I'm a bit shocked because I would have thought that would have been a sustainable program, because there's so many people out there who are saying that I don't have a job, I don't have a job, I don't have a job. And then there's this huge value chain that is available when it comes to the agricultural sector in Nigeria. Now, we were enlightened quite a bit further by the previous guest on the show last week, Mohammed. He said quite a few things that actually caught my personal interest, because I was like, okay, these are things that I'd never thought about before. A lot of people don't know that you don't necessarily have to be on the farm to make an impact when it comes to the agricultural sector. But at the same time, it still goes back to that education we were talking about. I know that as at that time, because I actually happened to have been working in Illinois at that point in time when that project was done and all that. So I did have some first-hand information. And I knew that a lot of effort was put into it with the hope that it would be quite a sustainable program. So it is coming to me as a shock that with all that effort. Now, why do you think that something went wrong when so much had been done?
I couldn't tell you. I know, for example, that Kwara made a big effort. Edo State has made a big effort in recent years. I know that Kaduna State today is making a huge effort. The governor of Kaduna State and his investment promotion agency, for example, has achieved the largest foreign direct investment into Nigeria in the last 2 years when it comes to agriculture and food production. They've attracted hundreds of millions of dollars into Kaduna State. So, you know, governments have made efforts. I don't know why the Kwara project has not expanded, because it should have expanded. Should have become based on the effort that was applied, it should have become a world-class project. That has not happened. I think, without knowing the specifics, my guess, my educated guess, will be that there remains inefficiencies in the demand side and in the whole ecosystem. It's all right to bring great farmers into Nigeria. It's all right to make sure that that part works, but there's so much more that needs to happen for these things to sustain. And I think that, if you're producing stuff and it gets to market and the pricing is wrong, if you're not storing food properly, if the markets are not developed, if the packaging is not right, if you go to many urban cities in Nigeria today, the tastes have changed. So young people today and middle-aged people are no longer buying food from markets. They're buying them from retail outlets. So there's so much that needs to happen from farm to the table. And those things that happen have to be efficient for things to sustain. You can't do projects in silos. And my educated guess is that this project was done and there was no take-up from the other parts of the chain that need to operate efficiently for it to sustain.
Okay, so you've mentioned the demand side a few times. I'm sure a few of the viewers are trying to figure out what does he mean by the demand side. Can you elaborate on the demand side?
Sure. So you grow maize in a farm, for example, right? So the minute you harvest, everything that happens after that is the demand side. So processors might take the maize off you and go process it to make other finished products. They have to make sure that the packaging is right so that it's attractive to the wholesalers and distributors. Those guys have to make sure that the pricing is right for the retailers to put it on the shelf so that you and I can eventually go and buy it and use it in our kitchen. So until all that bit is efficient, then we're going to struggle. And I think that that's the problem that I've found when operating in Nigeria and when I visited other African countries.
Yes, because now looking at it from what you've said, I look at a small country like the Netherlands, and I look at the level of efficiency that they have and how they're the #1 distributor in terms of the food chain in the world.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic, don't you think, that such a tiny country can achieve such a level of efficiency, and then a country as massive as Nigeria is just still in the woods. They just can't figure it out. Isn't it ironic?
Yeah. It is. And again, one of the major problems is funding. I walked into a retail outlet in Lagos about a month ago, and I saw some sesame oil on the shelf. Now, I know that we are involved very heavily in sesame seeds. And so I had a discussion with the owner, and he informed me very proudly that he buys his sesame oil from China. And I also found on the shelf packaged sesame seeds from Japan. Now, I know that Japan is one of the countries that buys most of Nigeria's sesame seeds. And it is ironic because so in our company, for example, we process to a certain level and we export, but we know that these sesame seeds are packaged and sold back to Africa. Now, if we had more funding, then we would try to get as close to the dining table as we could. But there are other issues. There are the issues of tariffs. So, for example, Western
tariffs?
So Western countries, for example, will slap on certain tariffs against goods that are coming into their country because they do this to advance the interests of their own business community. Yeah. Now, I think in Africa, we're not nuanced about some of these economic plays that's important for us to advance the interest of our economy. So apart from, people talk a lot about, we need to fund this sector so that we can produce goods. But on the other hand, our policymakers need to be aware of what happens. And one of the big issues is tariffs. So if I produce finished chocolates in Nigeria, for example, we have cocoa in Nigeria. It's not really rocket science to get the plant into Nigeria to make cocoa, to make chocolate, sorry. But I bet you $1 million when we try to ship it to the United Kingdom or Europe, we will find that they will price us out of the market. And these are the little tricks, if you like, that governments use to protect their own industries worldwide. And maybe we don't do so much of that in Africa.
That's rather unfortunate, because it becomes ironic all over again when you look at it from that perspective, because Nigeria, for instance, we are consumers. We don't produce anything more or less as a country. We keep importing this stuff. So if you're bringing a factory into Nigeria, set it up, process cocoa, and then make chocolates, you should adequately think that the West African market, Nigeria included, should be able to keep your business afloat. Why should we be looking towards Europe, for instance, for our exports and the sustenance for that particular business?
I think that businesses are attracted to look at the export market because our production, so I finish producing a product in Nigeria, right? I need my government to protect me. And if they don't, then, I'm facing competition from markets who may be more advanced than mine. So if you look at any food production, the only food products that we've had in Nigeria that have done well, if you look at the pasta products and rice, it's because government have protected them and they've put high tariffs on imports. If I'm engaged in producing a finished packaged food product in a sector that government has not protected me, then I'm struggling. I then become attracted to the idea of getting the semi-finished product out of the country for dollar receivables.
Wow. So short-term funding, lack of government participation or government protection, lack of adequate policies and all of that. All these are the challenges that you have highlighted. It will be quite a detriment to a lot of young people who have been looking in that direction and saying they will actually want to go into agriculture, but not into the production side of agriculture. It worries me. I'm sure it worries a lot of people. But then again, when you now look at the average individual, a lot of people in Nigeria want to just set up a tiny, small business, be able to earn a little something on a month-to-month basis, and then gradually they go from there. We have not seen that many in the agricultural sector. Do you have any idea why that is happening?
No, I think it's improving, huh? I think that I'm keen not to appear to be too dark about the agri and food production sector in Nigeria. I think there are huge opportunities. That's why we remain in it. And I can tell you that all the time I'm seeing new entrants into the marketplace. There are people who are producing packaged foods and selling into the retail sector in Nigeria and doing quite well. The fact that the retail sector in Nigeria is becoming very formalized, it's been very helpful. It's that thing I talked about earlier on, that the whole ecosystem needs to be efficient. So now that we have more formal retail outlets, you and I can go to Ondo State and go and get gari and package it properly and sell it into the retail sector, so that somebody who belongs to maybe the middle class or upper middle class can feel confident that he's going to buy, because with that sector of our people, their eyes will pay for the food before their mouths do. So if it's packaged properly, if it looks nice, they'll buy it. And I know a number of businesses that are taking advantage of the fact that that sector is the retail sector is becoming more formalized. The take-up of internet in Nigeria is huge, and so people are selling packaged food products online, and those businesses are beginning to happen. Especially young people, they behave very differently from my generation.
Oh yes,
and I think it's opening huge opportunities in that sector.
Okay. So we'll be right back. I don't want to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to get to the really fun part of this discussion. Where we're going to be talking about money. Everybody loves money. Everybody likes to hear something about money, especially how they can make some of that money. So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back shortly after this. Stay tuned. Hello, good evening, folks. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. Tonight, we've been discussing the agri-product supply chain with Michael Kadiri. Michael he has vast knowledge when it comes to the agri-product sector. He's told us quite a few things, what the challenges are and all of that. Now we're getting to the fun part where we're talking about money. A lot of young people in Nigeria are looking for different types of businesses to go into, different niches to try to become authorities in them so that they can dominate those areas of business. But a lot of them lack the right type of information. A lot of them lack ideas on where to get that type of information. Very few of them know that people like Michael exist. Why? Because he doesn't use social media like that. He's on LinkedIn mostly. And most young people would rather use Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and that kind of stuff. Now, Michael, it's great to have you on. A lot of these young people want to know, where do they start from? There's a lot of money to be made in agriculture, but they have no idea. Can you give us a little background? What was your passion? What drove you into agriculture in the first place? And then how these young people get started?
I always say with my fellow directors, one of them in particular, Titi Ijimakinwa, she's been with me for quite a number of years on this journey. We always talk about the fact that this space, the agribusiness, is it's a calling, actually. So if you go on our website, we say that agriculture is life. I really don't think that people should come into this business because they want to make money. If they do that, they won't make money. We almost come from a spiritual foundation because we think that we're dealing with food, we think we're dealing with land, and if you abuse it, if you are not committed to it, if you try to swing it, my personal opinion is that it won't work. This is not a space to come in because you're looking for get rich.
You can't make a quick buck from it.
No, you can't make a quick buck from it. You've got to be in it for a committed period of time. My background was that when I finished my education in England, 25, 30 odd years ago, I worked in the global pharmaceutical industry, after which I I went into business on my own and eventually started looking back to Africa, and landed back home, so to speak. And then we went into this sector. You're right in the fact that funding is an issue, but I think the landscape is changing. I think there are a number of things that are happening on a macro level that will mean that young people who have great ideas will attract money. So you and I know that globally today, because you put your money in a bank, you're not going to get returns.
Yeah.
And government bonds and treasury bills are not that attractive anymore. So there's a lot of dollars looking for good projects. And I think that kind of phenomenon is going to happen locally. The government in Nigeria, for example, is trying hard to impress upon Nigerian banks to lower interest rates. Having said that, the facts are that there is nowhere in the world that traditional banks lend money to businesses. And the agri sector is considered very risky, very risky. And so your traditional bank is not that enamored towards lending to this sector. But the private equity market in Nigeria is growing. It's still in its infancy, but people are beginning to be comfortable to leave their money on the table when the returns are long-term. It's not as much as we would like, but it's beginning to happen. And I would say to young people that if they develop projects that are interesting, there's increasingly money on the table to be had. And there's definitely development funding to be had. And contrary to perception, the global investment community continue to look at Nigeria. I know that they continue to speak to us. They continue to look at Nigeria because whatever you say, we are an interesting market. And the risk, the in-country risk that they see is one that can be mitigated if they feel that they found the right partner. Nigeria is still very interesting to foreign investors.
Nigeria has a really huge market. We have arguably over 200 million people. The purchasing parity doesn't seem that high, but we've seen Nigerians consuming stuff. Nigeria is arguably the largest consumer of Moët and Chandon, for instance, champagne brand in the world. But we haven't seen, grapes being grown in commercial quantities. We don't have the likes of the Napa Valley and stuff like that in Nigeria. We do know that grapes are being grown in some parts of Nigeria, like when you look at the Adamawa Hills, you look at Jos Plateau, but not in that type of commercial quantity where you can now start to make your own wines and make your own champagne. And you start to wonder if a country consumes this much, and the banks who are supposed to be in the business of trading with money still don't understand that you need to put this money in these small businesses and these medium-scale businesses to be able to drive the economy. Shouldn't this bank be culpable for doing this?
Like I said earlier on, right? The commercial banks all over the world don't typically lend to small and medium-sized businesses. They just don't do that. They're not trained. It's not in their DNA because they traditional brick and mortar banks don't understand business. They're very good at taking your deposits, a few products, and so. But the private equity market is where you will find money, and as long as the PE market continues to grow in Nigeria, then there will come opportunities to lend to small businesses. One thing that's happening is that foreign investors are looking into Nigeria. They see this huge population. They see the landscape of retail changing, is becoming formal, and they're seeing opportunities. So they will start to lend to small businesses, and then local money may follow suit. The truth is that if you have local money now, where do you put it? Do you put it in a bank? Your returns are not going to be what they were 10 or 20 years ago. You put it in government bonds.
Even 5 years ago.
Exactly. And now, so the landscape is changing. Maybe some of these bankers may leave the banks and start to run private equity businesses. As our economy develops, these things will come to the fore. And I think that the landscape will change. It'll be very slow, right? You and I may not be there to enjoy when the thing changes so that it becomes more sophisticated and you can put every good business plan will attract money. But it is changing. I do see that there is more funding for good, strong business ideas, especially those that have a technology slant to them.
Yes, I do agree with you. And I was actually going to disagree just a couple of points back when you spoke about, maybe not in our lifetime, because when you look at the technology space, for instance, especially when it comes to the money side of things, Nigerians, when people hear Nigeria, they hear money, there's always this heavy skepticism, around it. But we've seen that in the tech sector, especially when it comes to tech finance, Nigerians have been making some very strong leaps and bounds. We had the likes of Paystack. Paystack was developed a small company, and the next thing they were bought over by the likes of Stripe. And there's so many tech companies like that are coming up. We started hearing about something called, what is it again? Something Valley in Yaba, which is almost, trying to take on the shape of Silicon Valley and all that. A lot of small tech startups are moving to the Yaba area of Lagos, where they're all starting to do some form of collaborations and stuff and developing all sorts of amazing ideas. Now, I never thought that at any point in my lifetime, I would see a Nigerian company being accepted to process international payments. But I mean, it's happening. There are about 3 of them right now who are actually doing that kind of stuff. So probably when it comes to the technology side, yes, especially in agriculture, we might start seeing quite a few of those companies coming up. Maybe they will get the funding. But for private equity companies, they always come with ideas of, we have $100 billion minimum before you can actually get funding from us. All those kind of like really gargantuan projects that even Dangote will like, we told your money, I'm not ready for that kind of stuff. So when you mentioned, private equity a few minutes ago, I was like, oh God, them again. Because you talk to them and they come up with all these big, massive ideas. They really don't get people on the ground who understand what the local business, the culture behind the local business is, what they're about. So that they'll be able to say, okay, you know what? Here is $300,000. That's what you need. Here is $250,000. That's what you need. They keep talking about this big money. How are we going to be able to bridge that gap between the customer, which is the small tech companies or the startups, startups who need that funding, and the private equity companies?
You talked about Paystack earlier on. That was a big deal. Big deal.
Oh, yeah.
It was a big deal. It was no. When I say big deal, I don't mean the acquisition, although that was huge on its own, right? I think that the fact that it happened was a big deal because this was a pure play Nigerian business set up by 2 young guys, and it attracted the attention of a big Silicon Valley monster that has acquired them for this amount of money. And I say it was a big deal because now foreign money is going to be looking into Nigeria because they'll be like, there's more where that came from. And so sometimes you just need the catalyst. You talked about the agri sector, right? There are things happening in the world. You talked about Brexit earlier on. What does Brexit mean? When I start to be thoughtful about what Brexit may mean for my sector, right? Yeah. It means for me, as far as I'm concerned, and based on the sort of conversations I've been having in the last few weeks, the United Kingdom, in order to to recover and grow its economy is going to have to look back to the Commonwealth. And when it looks back to the Commonwealth, either to make investments or to do trade deals with, Nigeria will come in on its radar simply because we have a relationship. They were our colonial masters. I think that British business people feel comfortable with Nigerians and vice versa. And I won't be surprised if, funding for SMEs in the agri sector will come from the United Kingdom. I certainly think that that's a phenomenon that could occur in the coming years when British PE companies start looking at where to put their money after Brexit.
But we have heard some rumors around those sides that a lot of British companies are already scrambling, like going back to the amalgamation of Africa, they're already scrambling the game for Nigeria and looking at the Commonwealth and trying to figure it out as how, where are they going to start developing their supply chains from. They have funds, they want to put in there and all that. We've had requests from a few people asking questions, wanting to get more information on it, thinking they could jump on the bandwagon and start putting together agri-products, exporting to the UK and stuff like that. But like I said, rumors, there's nothing that's been substantiated so far. And from what I can pick up from what you're saying, it's still not substantiated. But does that mean that it's time for people who are in that sector in Nigeria to start positioning themselves adequately for that opportunity when it springs up?
I always say to people, when it comes to issues of funding, it's about speaking the right language. So a few weeks ago, we at our company we have a consulting arm, and we did a webinar where we invited people from the central bank and businesses and fund managers. And the idea was to start the conversation, because I think that in order for me to get your money in your line, in order for me to get your money, I need to speak your language. And one of the big disconnects is that African businesses don't speak the language of the funders. We don't typically know what they want. We don't know how to put a deal together, and therefore we don't attract them. Some of the things that we think might be important to us, it's not necessarily important. It's not what they're looking for. So one of the things that we need, when you say how do Nigerian businesses, SMEs prepare themselves or ready themselves, is to speak the language of the funder, is to understand what will make a funder tick the box. And I know, for example, that when a fund manager is looking at a farm project, right, one of his biggest risk areas is insurance.
Yeah.
So how does the farmer insure his products to make sure that, if anything goes pear-shaped, nobody loses their shirt? And so a farming business in Nigeria needs to understand that these are the sentiments that are in the minds of these guys. So SMEs, for example, in Nigeria might think, if I'm speaking to these foreign fund managers, if I tell them that by next year we will double the money, it may impress us as Nigerians because we are people that want instant gratification. To a fund manager who is sitting in London or in Brussels or in New York, you're scaring him because he thinks that it's too good to be true. Now, sometimes these projects do make unusual profits, but we need to be tempered in the language. We need to speak in a way that they understand or that doesn't scare them. And so these are some of the areas that we need to be thoughtful about.
You're quite correct. And unfortunately, a lot of Nigerian businesses don't value services, so to speak. Once something is not tangible, they seem to have an idea. They seem to think that it's just not worth their money. And a lot of them just will not put their money behind it. So a lot of them do need. I was speaking to somebody this morning. I got a call this morning. Somebody was speaking to me about an idea that he had. He's a chartered accountant, and he was trying to figure out how he could work from home and be able to, carve a niche for himself or develop a niche that he could focus on and all that. And I had to, really break it down from that. There's so many different areas that you can look at. There are niches and there are micro niches. It's all just a function of you knowing where you needed to go. But he now said to me, but Nigerians don't like to pay for services. How do I get my money? Now, that's a question that I have no answers to, unfortunately. So when you talk about small businesses in Nigeria, for instance, being able to speak the language of foreign managers, yes, it's going to be quite a challenge. They still need education on finance, the financial language, even technology. We've seen a lot of them, they don't even know what risk management is. They just think that risk management is just, what if I lose my money? They don't understand that the analysis goes quite deeper than that. And then rather than hire somebody, I pay the person a pittance today to save them a ton of money tomorrow, they shy away from that. So they obviously are not going to go and start paying.
I think I've lost you if you can hear me.
Sorry, Michael, I'd like to apologize for that.
That's
Internet.
fine.
And like I tell people that anywhere else in the world, you just never know with technology. So now we're getting towards the tail end of the show, and one or two people have a few questions. So I'm just going to put one of those questions, on screen for you to. So let's see if we can have a small discussion around that. So Alonso from the United States says, can you give a blueprint or high-level process of how to get funding from international investors, especially if I'm not looking for funding in the millions of dollars that most VCs require as minimum investments? So the same thing I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to the type of language that those VCs, they speak, where they keep talking about minimum 10 million, minimum $50 million investments, stuff like that. Do you know of any private equity firms that are already operating in Nigeria, for instance, who are doing like small scale investments and stuff like that? How can people find them? Can you?
Okay, so I'm when I talk about speaking the language, one of the things I mean is, say you and I had, $5 million in our pocket, right? And we get an interest, a request from a Nigerian company who wants to produce I don't know, sausage rolls, right? That is going to sell locally. Now, we have a difficulty because we're saying to ourselves, right, we're going to throw our $5 million inside Nigeria. The policy landscape is a bit wonky, so we're going to be competing against foreign sausage rolls, and where our receivables are in Naira, which gets devalued all the time. So you and I will, at the end of doing our numbers and our analysis, may come to the conclusion that, we think we may not get our money back, right? And this is what I mean. And so it is also the reason why the investments that you see coming into Nigeria in the agri sector are the huge big ticket investments, of $50, $100 million investments.
Yeah.
Because when you're investing at that scale, you're mitigating some of the risks that afflict SMEs. An SME can be blown away by the wrong wind. A large business is a little bit more robust. So if I were an SME, I would look at not the VC market, I would look at development finance. Development finance has different metrics. It's saying we're going to put our money because we want to develop communities. And that's the kind of money I would look to get if I were a small or medium-sized enterprise. And in trying to get that money, I will try to prove that my project is going to uplift a community and it's actually going to do good, which is why at the very start of this, I said, don't come into this business if you're looking for a get-rich scheme.
Okay, so social enterprise nature.
Yes, so you have to do good. There's also family offices who may be interested in small and medium-sized enterprises and may be looking at that less than $1 million project. Family offices are probably more likely. VCs and PE companies, I doubt that they will be interested in projects that are less than $20 million, so to say.
Excuse me. So a little aside, just something in referral to the sausages that you mentioned earlier on, and those sausages being more expensive, local sausages being more expensive than the imported ones. So I walked into a supermarket in Abuja sometime last year, and I wanted to buy sausages. And I was like, I want the made in Nigeria one. So the attendant, one of the attendants in the store was like, oh God, this is the made in Nigeria one, and blah, 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 blah. And this is the foreign one. So I looked at the quality of both. They looked, on par. Everything seemed all right. So next thing, the guy was now like, the Nigerian one is more expensive. And I was like, why is the Nigerian one more expensive? Now, it didn't really strike me until the next morning when I took a drive, I was going out, and I was on a major highway, and the next thing I saw plenty of cows. I was like, but these are cows walking everywhere. So why is this sausage more expensive when it's local than the imported ones? Amazing, isn't it?
I'll quickly tell you why. The fact that you saw cows walking around, that's why it's expensive. Cows are not, they're supposed to be in ranches. They're not supposed to be down the high street. And so therein lies the problem. So if you're the foreign producer of sausages is operating a very efficient supply chain and is operating very efficient processes. And the least expensive part of his supply chain is actually the shipping it into Nigeria, where he faces no tariffs from a government who's trying to support its local businesses. And therefore, his product on the shelf of our retail outlets will, of course, be cheaper.
Now, I know quite a few of the viewers who are watching this, they love meat, as in beef especially. Now, you've heard firsthand from Michael Kadiri why the meat you're eating is so expensive. It's because they're walking around. Because there was been a contentious issue around ranching in Nigeria. I don't know if you ever heard of the Ruga, issues like that. So for those of you who love plenty of meat, but then you're against Ruga, I think you should start having a rethink, because now you can hear why it's so expensive. The beef you're eating and the local sausages. And unfortunately, these are organic as opposed to most of the ones that are imported that you're eating. So they're supposed to be healthier. So I'm not making a case for Ruga, I'm just saying, really. So these are some of the issues.
I will make a case for Ruga, because I think that, I don't know why what the sentiments behind the government's proposals were. But on the face of it, if you look anywhere in the world where meat is being produced at scale, it is not produced by cows walking from Kano to Lagos. That's not going to work. We need to come into the modern world. Best food production happens, meat production happens from cows in ranches. And actually, this year, I've seen investments in ranches, private investment in ranches that are happening in Nigeria. So, whatever happened to the government's Ruga proposals, because it was politically shut down, I promise you that private sector players are looking at that space, and eventually that's what's going to happen.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that. I know somebody that's invested in a ranch as far back as 10 years ago in that same Kwara state. And he actually started doing crossbreeding. And he was booked out for about 4 or 5 years from one of these large chains who wanted some particular sides of the beef and all of that. So I do have an idea that it is very profitable. And I'm glad to hear that quite a few of those PE firms are beginning to look in that direction and beginning to look for people or small businesses or medium scale businesses, as the case might be, that are looking in that direction as well. Now, Michael, this has been a highly enlightening conversation. We could go on and on and on and on and on, but we wouldn't want to take any more of your time. Usually on Just Banter, we find ourselves going to the 1 hour 20 mark because we always find our conversations rather interesting. But we wouldn't do that to you tonight, especially considering the fact that, it took quite a while to be able to get you, to take that amount of time to sit down and be able to take this interview, especially it being live. So we will show our appreciation by cutting it short now at this point in time, and looking forward to another time that we can bring you back on, this time to talk about how can we push education in agriculture further down the line. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on, and it's been absolutely fantastic having you.
Thank you, Habib. I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I'm happy to support your project. I think what you're doing is fantastic. Well done, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you. You have a great weekend ahead.
You too,
stay
sir.
safe. All right, thank you. All right.
Cheers.
So, highly intelligent man, and he's told us quite a few things. Now, most of what he has said is high level, and I know that quite a few people would have taken notes and then do a little bit more research further down the line. I'm sure if you listen to an intelligent person, they usually catch your attention. So I'm sure he did catch your attention, and I'm glad I was opportunity to sit here and listen to him. And I'm sure I'm going to call him again somewhere along the line, personally, that is, and have some more discussions with him about agriculture in Nigeria, how we can move things forward, and how we can actually start to spread the word. Because you can't have any form of major production anywhere in the world without actually having a robust agricultural sector. And with roughly 33 million farmers on the African continent, and then 65% of the available arable land in the world still in Africa, I'm sure you can see that the potentials are rather huge. So you can look at Michael's website. I'm sure it's going to be somewhere in the comments, and then you could actually have a further look at what it is that they do. If you have any questions or you think that there's any form of value that you'll be able to get by getting in touch with Michael, I'm sure if you do, he'll be glad to actually give you a response, or somebody from his team will respond to you. He holds quite a few seminars, so you could also go on YouTube. I'm sure they have a channel for that, or on their website. You probably see some information relating to some of the things that you might like to do. But in the event that you don't, send an email to them, or send an email to one of the email addresses that you will see on their websites. He's a very, very nice person. He would respond to you most definitely. It's been a great time having him on. Now, a great weekend coming up ahead. A great in the sense that 10 years ago, a massive paradigm shift happened. Something happened that shook the entire world, and it reshaped the world as we know it today, especially when it comes to the Middle East, and that was the Arab Spring. It's this weekend, 10 years. We'll be looking at that over the weekend, having talks with a couple of people on ground live in Tunisia. Yes, where it all started. We'll be talking about Bourguiba. We'll be talking about Tunisia. We'll be talking about the Maghreb, and we'll be talking about the Middle East in general and the impact that the Arab Spring has had. We'll see you on Sunday. But before we go, as usual, our social messages, like we always say, we say, let's kick rape out of Africa. Let's keep rape out of the world. We need to fight this pandemic called rape. We need to protect our women. We need to protect our children. We need to protect the elderly who are also vulnerable. We always like to remind you of the statistics, which is 1 in 4 women in Nigeria, for instance, go through that horrendous experience called sexual molestation, i.e. rape, before the age of 18. So that means when you stand outside your house or you're standing on the road and you count 1, 2, 3, 4 women, then 1 out of them has actually been abused. 1 in 10 young men before the age of 18 also. So same thing. 10 young men, 1 out of them has that horrendous history. Most of them can't even speak out. So we all need to start fighting against it. We all need to start saying something. The hashtags are on the screen. You can always use either of the hashtags, or you can use both, depending on how much you want to support. Nobody's asking for any money. We're just saying say something so that the world knows that this needs to stop. If you have children, take a very, very close look at them. Sometimes they don't speak out. It's just from their body language that you will know that there's something wrong with them. We spoke about a young man, or a young boy, 10, 11 years old, who was abused in secondary school recently, Don Davis. We're still watching carefully to see where that matter goes. The police are now fully involved. They've taken over the investigations. But it's just an insight into the type of things that can happen to your children if you don't pay close attention. In some cases, you do pay close attention, but something just happens, something just goes wrong. So you need to be on the lookout. You need to watch very carefully what it is that your kids are not saying. Now, COVID-19 is still very real. It's killing so many people, lockdowns everywhere. Please stay safe, wear a face mask when you're in a public space, wash your hands as often as possible, and try to maintain a safe distance. COVID vaccines are rolling out. A lot of people are going to have to take them, but taking them does not necessarily guarantee that you will not catch the virus again. So you still need to stay safe as we'll take the precautionary measures. I'd like to say a very big thank you to all of you that took out the time to sit down and watch Just Banter from beginning to end. For those of you who have supported us from day one, we still see you. We can still see that you're there. So we say, yay, well done. Thank you very much. And God bless you all for taking out the time to watch. We'll see you on Sunday when we do the next live show. And then we'll be talking about the Arab Spring. You all have a great night. Good night.